You there! Have you been looking for an RPG with rich dialogue and with a strong focus on realistic conversations? An RPG with heavy, brutal combat and a no-nonsense approach to adult elements, all set within a big, beautiful, dynamic, and seamless open world? Because if you have, then oh boy, do I have the game for you! Of course, I'm talking about the Gothic 1 remake that is being developed by Alchimia Interactive and published by THQ Nordic, who are also the sponsors of today's video. Now, getting right into it, if you have no idea what this game is, well, the original Gothic was an absolute pioneer of the RPG genre. Actually, it was so influential that it served as a major inspiration for the Witcher games. And so, with this full remake being built from the ground up in Unreal Engine 5, Alchimia is bringing the gritty player choice magic of Gothic back to life. Now this brings us to the setting of the game, which is the Valley of Mines. And well, the premise is this. You're essentially dumped into this big colony that is entirely encased in an inescapable magical dome. But, well, things haven't exactly gone to plan for the king who built it, because the inmates have completely taken over. It's pretty much a huge fantasy prison riot that evolved into its own functioning society, with the prisoners split up into these warring factions. And I have to say, just looking at the footage, the atmosphere is just oozing out the screen. The devs actually talked in depth about how they went for a very specific Baroque art style for the remake. You know, instead of just making a generic, overly shiny Unreal Engine 5 fantasy world, they leaned heavily into some very deep shadows, a high contrast, and a really grounded medieval setting. It's a dark fantasy game, and it actually looks dark and gritty, but in a remarkably gorgeous way. And then we have the dynamic weather system that they've built for the game, which is also looking pretty insane. There are full-blown thunderstorms that literally light up the pitch-black night with lightning strikes and thick, heavy fog that rolls in right after the rain clears out, which immediately gives the game a sense that it's almost breathing. Combine that with the sheer variety of the map, from exploring surprisingly vibrant pine forests to trekking through some very unsettling and murky swamps, and it just makes the whole ecosystem feel incredibly alive from the gameplay that I've seen. So if you're anything like me and immersion is your jam, then you're in for quite a feast here. Now, that also brings us to one of the biggest selling points of the Gothic remake: the complete lack of hand-holding. Now, most of you know that in a lot of modern titles, you just end up chasing a dotted line or a glowing icon on a minimap, but Gothic is a true old-school experience. You see, there are no magical quest markers guiding your every step, and you actually have to pay attention to conversations, and look for visual landmarks and figure things out for yourself. When you start the game, you don't even have a map, you have to buy one. Essentially, the game is built to challenge you. The devs even talked about the in-game economy and how they actively designed the game so you can't just hoard hundreds of potions like in other games, because the world of Gothic is harsh, and you're forced to actually use your crafted items and cooked food just to survive. So it's an RPG with survival mechanics, essentially. Now, speaking of survival, exploring at night in the Gothic remake is a completely different beast compared to exploring during the day. You see, when the sun goes down, it gets incredibly dark, and if you don't have a light spell or a torch, you are going to get completely lost in the woods. But I have to say, there's this brilliant little mechanic I noticed in the footage where if you get attacked, you can actually physically stab your torch directly into the dirt. And this lights up your immediate surroundings and frees up both of your hands to draw your weapon, and it's just a really smart and immersive detail. Now, aside from fighting for your life, there's a ton of depth to how you traverse the world, because you're not forced to follow the beaten path here. The game features proper climbing mechanics, allowing you to scale the environments to find hidden paths, and you can even dive completely underwater to explore sunken shipwrecks and loot hidden treasures. And while we're on the subject of loot, I really like how they've handled lockpicking, because from the looks of it, it's an actual engaging minigame where you have to line up these plates and carefully insert your pick into the right slots to crack a chest. The developers really seem to have gone out their way to make sure that every single action you take and every piece of loot you find feels completely earned. And speaking of feeling rewarded, that brings us to the combat and how you progress in the Gothic 1 remake. First and foremost, Gothic gives you a sort of zero to hero experience, as when you start out, you're quite literally a nobody running around in rags. Even a single basic scavenger dinosaur bird looking thingy here can absolutely ruin your day if you aren't careful. That is to say, you have to earn every single inch of your power level. However, as you invest time into the game's highly flexible RPG system, you get to truly shape your own destiny here. You can completely specialize the hero, whether you choose to master melee combat, archery, or magic. And I have to say that after hours of looking at the various footage provided by the devs, the combat here seems incredibly weighty and satisfying. At any rate, no matter what build you decide to go with, the wildlife in the colony is very unforgiving. Like, even these goofy little bloodsuckers here can destroy you if you're not careful. Alright, now giant bugs aside, we have to talk about the living, breathing ecosystem of the colony. You see, the devs put a huge amount of effort into making sure the NPCs don't just stand around waiting for you to walk by. Because the NPCs have daily routines, and this is perfectly showcased when the footage takes us into the swamp camp, which is run by this fanatical cult. Now, these weirdos are entirely dedicated to a mysterious entity known as the Sleeper, and as you walk through their camp, they are chanting about deliverance, dealing with lazy workers, plotting to secretly sell their harvest on the side, and yes, they are absolutely blazing it. But hey, if you're into that, you can actually join that life and live your colony life as a devout swamp brother. And I have to say, the presentation during these conversations is looking pretty good. The dialogue camera thankfully isn't just statically locked into a character's face, as it actively sways and moves to give the scenes a more cinematic and natural feel, paired with some pretty solid facial animations. Speaking of which, the elements that really bring these interactions together is the protagonist himself. The voice acting is just really natural, and the guy just sounds entirely fed up with everyone's nonsense, and this leads to some absolute gold in the dialogue tree. There's this cultist that, after telling him to go back to work and mash herbs, our guy here just deadpans with,
"Just want to see you mashing."
Or when another asks him to stay and help turn the swamp into a field of flowers, he hits him with the good old, "Sounds great, how about you get started already? I'll join you later." He didn't actually join him later. So the game seems like it's got plenty of gritty realism, but also a pretty fantastic sense of humor and personality to balance it all out. Alright, now wrapping all of this up, I have to say that it seems like the developers really are delivering here. They know exactly how passionate and incredibly vocal the classic fanbase is, but instead of just ignoring the noise, they've actively taken it on the chin and used it to make a pretty faithful remake. At least from where I sit. It really is a big undertaking to bring a 20-year-old grandfather of the RPG genre into the modern era without losing its very soul, but from what we've seen today, they are absolutely cooking with a Gothic remake. Now, finally, the Gothic 1 remake officially drops on June 5th. The game is launching on PC, PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S, and yes, you can pre-order as we speak, and if you do, make sure to go through my link to support the channel. The link is in the pinned comment and description down below. Thank you for watching, and thank you again to THQ Nordic for sponsoring this video. This has been Mr. Holton, signing off.